Hi, I'm Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 69. Um, Loretta Young gets engaged, but he's a crook. Uh, now, in the last podcast, I mentioned my niece Natasha Funk. She lives in Miami. She gave me this beautiful for my birthday, 78, and the gold leaf flower that's in it is a was a gift from her mother, my sister-in-law Marina, a number of years ago. So, oh, so if you want a very professional producer to do a podcast, and God knows you wouldn't be hearing one word from me unless I had Natasha helping me. Go to white noise level 3 at gmail.com. White noise level 3 at gmail.com. And I'll mention this again at the end of this podcast. Okay, so Loretta gets engaged. He's a crook. Flo Burton, or actually Bergen, a niece of Douglas Fairbanks, who Loretta knew from her boarding school days, was married to Shirley Bergen, a great grandson of Cornelius Vanderbilt, the big railway tycoon. They were eminent Los Angeles hosts, and Flo Bell persisted in Loretta meeting a young man named Bill Buckner. She said, "He's from a very good people. I don't think wealthy, but good, solid people." So Loretta agreed to go with him to a dinner party at the Burdens. She recalled, "He certainly had beautiful manners and clothes and was a good conversationalist. He had connections and was in the bond business." Flo Bell was right. I liked him a lot. Bill Buckner was 30 years old and Loretta 25. He was handsome in kind of a boyish way and Ivy League in manner. Loretta found herself more than intrigued. Bill Buckner seemed so different from the previous men in her life. He had nothing to do with the film industry, yet he had all the trappings of success that was so appealing. His base was in New York, so theirs was a long distance romance. Now that suited Loretta just fine, as she was busy finishing up her obligations to Zanuck. Mm-hmm. She had the comfort of knowing that there was a privacy romance in her life, uh, and at 3,000 miles away, he could appear all the more promising without really disturbing her illusion. He would come to the coast, he would come to the West Coast just often enough to make Loretta seem tangible. The long distance calls were long indeed, and Loretta discovered the thrill of writing and receiving wonderfully romantic letters. The relationship became quite serious in the matter of 6 months. Loretta recalled, "We talked about marriage, and in fact, I was informally engaged to him. I thought he was just perfect for me. He was eligible, he was Catholic, and he hadn't been married before, and he wasn't an actor. I had had it with actors, and yes, he was handsome." Now, he was not what he appeared to be. Now, this is me in my voice. The Securities Exchange Commission had him under surveillance for some time, and upon returning from a business trip to Europe, he was arrested and charged with mail fraud. The December 2nd, 1938 edition of the Los Angeles Times reported, okay, Buckner defrauded bondholders of the Philippine Railway Company of a total that may exceed $100,000. And think what $100,000 would have been in 1939. He is charged with fraudulently manipulating the value of the bonds by cabling a false report to Manila, which indicated that the bonds were being purchased at an inflated value in New York. Buckner was quoted as saying that the complaints against him was nothing at all, it's all on the level. And then he also said he plans to marry Miss Young and fly to Honolulu for their honeymoon. Now, Loretta recalled her shock. I woke up one day and read the newspaper headline: Loretta Young's fiance arrested for fraud. In a way, I knew it couldn't be completely untrue. They must have had some evidence, some proof, or they wouldn't have arrested him. But I didn't put it together with him because he never mentioned anything about his business to me, ever. Had he asked me, want to buy $100,000 worth of bonds, I would have said sure if I had it. But we never talked about business. In the course of 6 to 8 months that I had known him, I introduced him to an awful lot of my friends, motion picture people. Now, this is Loretta. Buck flew out 3 or 4 days later, and after a few hours of talk, I was convinced that he was more right than wrong. I decided to make a public show of my belief in him. So we made reservation at Ciro's, a table for two under his name. That alerted the press, and as we arrived at 8 p.m. prompt, the flash bulbs blinded us. Buck went back to New York, and eventually he stood trial. We had agreed that I would stay away. He said, "It will be too gruff on you, Loretta. They're going to make their point with me." I was crazy about Buck, but I also embarrassed by the whole episode. I wanted to trust him as one in love is supposed to do, but I couldn't. So I started feeling guilty. I never had the guts of honesty to honestly and simply ask him, "Did you do it?" Between his trials and sentencing, Buckner was able to make another trip to Los Angeles, Loretta recalled. After dinner one night, he said, "I think if I had $100,000, I could clear this whole thing up right now." I said, "Well, I haven't gotten 100,000. I have 10,000 I know I can put my hands on, but not 100,000. I mean, I pay for this house. This is a big house in Bel Air. I have a lot of expenses." He said, "Oh, no, no, no." And I said, "Well, I'd be delighted to give you the 10,000. I didn't want to go and get it out of the bank because I was afraid that some overly dedicated reporter might follow me. So I called my public relations man and asked him to go and get it. I had that money from a couple of radio shows, and I was trying to hang on to some money because I'd never been able to hang on to anything. I mean, not that her mother wasn't doing some very astute investments, but in terms of putting her hands on cash, Loretta was very limited. Anyway, I gave it to him, and I didn't expect to get it back. And really, way down deep in my heart, I kept praying that he wouldn't take it, but he did. Of course, it didn't fix anything. He went to prison. Once again, Loretta threw herself into work. My negotiated a deal with Loretta to star in Eternal Years for independent producer Walter Wanger. Her leading man was former house guest David Niven. He played a musician, and Loretta played his wife and assistant. Xanad had one last trick up his sleeve for Loretta. His ego had been so wounded, and he wanted retribution. It is not known if he was cagey enough to wait for her to do one project before he put his plan into action, or if it was Loretta's sliding into a freelance career so easily with Eternal Years that really goaded him. Loretta describes Xanad's revenge. After I left 20th Century Fox, or even really before I left, every producer I would see would say, "Oh, I have a script I'm dying to send you." I was delighted. It was going to work out so well. To my amazement, 9 months after Eternal Years, I was still waiting. And that amazement turned to panic that I would never work again. Now, Myron came to me and he told me that he heard I was being blackballed. He said, "I know exactly what happened. In one of those Sunday night poker games, Daryl Zanuck asked if any one of the big producers sitting around the table were interested in hiring Loretta Young. Falling in line, they all said no. That's all it takes to set up the blackball. But it also takes only one guy to break it." And Myron Selznick, I think, he said to me, "I think I know the man who can do it. Harry Cohn." That's his head of Columbia. Harry Cohn. Harry's got a couple of scripts over there One of them, I know he tried to get Irene done. She's tied up and he's looking around for a substitute. I gave him a price on you. Um, he got a bargain. And I said, if I give him a price on you that he had a bargain, he'd go for it. So instead of $100,000 asking price, I think Myron settled for 60. Within 2 days, I was signed and ready to do The Doctor Takes a Wife. Myron knew these men and their personalities backwards. 1 second. Now, in the next podcast, Loretta meets Tom Lewis, who she eventually marries. Whether this was a good thing or not will take several podcasts to unravel. Now, I hope you join us. There's a lot of very interesting things in her Tom Lewis story. So see you next week. Bye-bye. Oh, I'm repeating again. If you want to do podcasts and look for a producer, my niece Natasha Funk at White Noise Level 3 at gmail.com. White Noise Level 3 at gmail.com. Thanks so much.